This video classroom lesson is sponsored by Transmission Bench. Visit the transmissionbench.com store for the deluxe super kit, other parts, and even the video classroom lessons used during this project.
One of the greatest discoveries a man makes, one of his great surprises, is to find he can do what he was afraid he couldn't do. This statement was made by Henry Ford 100 years ago. He also said, "Nothing is particularly hard if you divide it into small jobs." Both quotes appropriately apply to our journey repairing this transmission. Welcome back. This is AODE 4R70W class, Part 2, Lesson 2. If you'll recall, in addition to building a wooden press, we took apart and inspected several sub-assemblies in our last lesson. With the aid of the press, snap rings which retain return spring cages were removed to allow removal of the clutch drum pistons and seals. We also disassembled the pump and checked the valve body separator plate for cracks. This lesson will cover an overall assessment of internal parts condition, an introduction to rebuilding kits and replacement components, as well as where to get them. We'll also begin the reassembly of the transmission. Let's begin by taking another look at the parts on the bench. After washing the parts with solvent or mineral spirits and allowing them to dry, take another closer look at all the parts and make a list of damaged components which need replacement. For example, once again inspect the output shaft to make sure these sealing rings turn freely. Even though the rings will be replaced with new ones, the grooves must be healthy and appear as these do. Make sure the journal where the direct clutch drum bushing rides is smooth, straight, and free of any gouging. The ring grooves for the Teflon seals here must be free of any evidence of metal-to-metal contact with the direct clutch drum. If you find any damage, this shaft will have to be replaced. Take another look at the thrust bearings. There are 8 in this transmission. They cannot really be evaluated dry, so add a little fluid back into each one and check to make sure all of them turn effortlessly. Of particular interest is the one between the planetary carrier and the direct clutch drum. It's located in the direct clutch assembly on top of the bearing support washer. Because of the extreme thrust load on it, it fails more often than others. Put a little fluid on it and make sure it turns with absolutely no friction or chatter from pitting of the races. If you have any doubts about its condition, make a note to order a new one. Another example of closer inspection is to take a second look at the forward clutch drum and input shaft. Check for any tearing of the metal here in the snap ring groove. Check the bushing journals here and here for any damage such as gouging or deep scratches. The Teflon seals obviously come into contact with the pump bore to seal, but the sealing ring grooves, like the ones on the output shaft, should have no indication of contact with the bore in the pump. Damage here is caused by extremely worn bushings in the pump and can cause a mushrooming at the edges of the grooves to the point they pinch and destroy the softer Teflon sealing rings. Check the bore here for gouging. It should be free of any steps from sealing ring wear and be smooth. Any damage to the shaft or drum will require them to be replaced. The two are available as an assembly. Let's take another final look at the direct clutch drum. Check the two journals where the planetary carrier bushing rides here and where the sun gear bushing rides here. Like other bushing journals, there should be no steps or deep scratches from wear. There is a unique aspect to the bore here where the rings of the output shaft come into contact with the drum. What might at first appear and feel as deep grooves from wear are actually intentional raised areas where the sealing rings seal against the bore. Don't mistake them for damage. The drum is made this way. Even though this direct clutch drum is acceptable to reuse, you may encounter one damaged to the point it must be replaced. Let me demonstrate with another direct clutch assembly from another transmission project. This is actually a typical problem you may run into. The thrust bearing between the planet carrier and the direct clutch drum failed and broke apart. This allowed the drum to move forward off of the sealing rings on the output shaft. The result was loss of hydraulic pressure, severe slipping, and finally a destroyed clutch pack. Here are the remaining pieces of the shattered bearing which were still present in the assembly after I took it apart. Remember, this is what it normally looked like. I suspect the rest of the bearing needles and bits of the races ended up inside the body of the filter. This drum had to be replaced because of damage where it rubbed against the planetary carrier. It was damaged so badly I had to use a bench grinder to remove the smeared melted area here in order to remove the end plate of the clutch pack. The spring cage and even the piston were also damaged and had to be replaced. If you unfortunately find these parts ruined in your transmission, you can get replacements. The drum and thrust bearing can be purchased individually. There is a separate repair package available which includes the piston, spring cage, and snap ring. Let's go back to the parts bench. Continue the inspection. Check the gears and clearances of the planetary carrier. Use a feeler gauge to check the gear to carrier in play. It should be 30 thousandths or less. Also carefully inspect each gear for broken teeth. Excessive in play and even one slightly chipped tooth will mean you must replace the entire planetary gear set and carrier. Take a close look at the teeth on the sun gear and drive shell too. They are available new if damaged. Finally, check the teeth in the output ring gear carefully. If you find one missing or a part of a tooth chipped, this part will also need replacement. Check the reverse drum. If it's discolored here or the overdrive band was burned black, place a ruler against it to make sure it's straight and not warped and dished from extreme heat. And as we did with the forward drum, check the sealing ring bore for wear, such as gouging. If you find damage to the reverse drum, order a new one. If you are working on an AODE or early 4R70W with a roller clutch here, inspect the outer race and the individual rollers and accordion springs which mount on the other side. If any of them are damaged or broken, they are available new. Even though the pump was disassembled and inspected in the last lesson, check it again one more time now that it's been cleaned. Check the reverse drum bushing journal for unacceptable wear and make sure the sealing ring grooves are in perfect shape. The rings obviously contact and seal against the forward and reverse drums, but there should be no evidence of groove land contact with one of the drums. Mushroomed and smeared metal in these areas is caused by extreme bushing and input shaft journal wear and is unacceptable. If you encounter this type of damage in the transmission you are working on, I suggest that you get a replacement pump assembly. Even though individual parts of the pump, such as the stator support, pump rotors, and body are available new separately, the variations in design over the years can be confusing even for an experienced rebuilder. If yours is damaged, get a complete new pump assembly. Inspect all of the servo return springs as well as the accumulator springs. They should all appear as the ones here. It's very common to find the springs on either side of the 1 to 2 accumulator piston broken. Each of these springs is available new if you need to replace one. Finally, examine the case. Check the threads in all the bolt holes for the pan, valve body, pump, and the extension housing. If any are damaged, they can be restored by drilling the hole oversize, rethreading with a tap, and installing a thread insert. Check the output shaft bore where the rings seal against the case. It should be straight with no grooves from wear. Any damage in this area will mean, unfortunately, the replacement of the case. In addition to replacements for any of the parts we just inspected, you'll also need a kit which contains all of the other ingredients of a well-built, long-lasting transmission. This is the Deluxe Super Kit, which is available along with other components we've mentioned in this lesson from the Transmission Bench store. It consists of a Master Overhaul Kit, which contains an overhaul package with friction and steel plates, an overdrive band, many commonly replaced bushings, shift solenoids, a filter, 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 accumulator pistons, 1 to 2 accumulator cover, and may or may not contain, depending on transmission model, an EPC or electronic pressure control solenoid. Also included is a supplemental kit made by the Sonax company called the Sure Cure Kit. It contains ingenious solutions to correct problems from wear in the valve body, overdrive piston pin bore, and other areas of the transmission. Let's open it and look at the contents. Along with very detailed and easy to understand instructions, you will find components for the valve body such as a new pressure regulator valve and booster sleeve assembly, a new bypass clutch control valve, sleeve, and spring, a new 2 to 3 shift valve end plug, and a retainer. There are also parts to solve leakage problems in other areas of the transmission. There's a special overdrive piston pin with 2 unique O-ring grooves to prevent pressure loss around it. You also get special Teflon sealing rings for the input and output shafts and the stator support. Finally, there is a two-piece system to use in place of the snap ring, which fastens the one-way clutch to the reverse drum. The cost of this kit may seem a little high, but it's worth it. Consider this. The solution for the leakage around the piston pin by itself saves you the cost of having to replace the case. Each one of the components in this kit fixes very common problems known to develop in the AODE 4R70W transmission family over time. In my opinion, you cannot thoroughly rebuild this transmission without this kit. Now let's go over the contents of the Master Overhaul Kit. It contains all of the replacement friction and steel plates needed for the forward, direct, intermediate, and reverse clutch packs, along with an overhaul package. The overhaul package includes cork and paper gaskets, front pump and extension housing metal clad seals, lip seals, O-rings, and many other small parts needed during the assembly of the transmission. Many of the parts are thoughtfully sub-packaged for easy identification. Also included are data sheets which inform you of updates, help you select correct gaskets, indicate check ball locations, and even list torque specifications for all of the bolts. In addition to other damaged parts you may find during the disassembly of your transmission, the Deluxe Super Kit you see here should be your minimum part starting point for the ingredients of a thorough rebuild of the transmission. Now let's look at a few more parts you might want to include in your rebuild, which we'll install anyway for demonstration. They are a replacement separator plate, plate protector kit, reverse band, and a reverse band servo piston and cover. If you are working on a 2000 and later 4R70W or 4R70E and your plate is cracked, as I mentioned in Part 2, Lesson 1, you'll need this replacement separator plate. This is a support plate you can install for additional insurance against cross leaks in the valve body. Even though the reverse band in our demo transmission is okay, this is what a new one looks like, and I'll install it anyway. The last replacement parts I want to introduce are the new reverse servo piston and servo cover. If the bonded seals on your old ones are hard and crystallized from heat, they will not seal well and can lead to slipping and eventual failure of the reverse band. Here are all of the replacement parts we'll be using during the reassembly of our 2001 demonstration 4R70W. Once again, we'll be using all of the components of a Super Deluxe kit and these additional parts: new separator plate, support plate, reverse band, servo piston, and servo cover. We're about finished with this lesson, but I want to take at least one step forward in the reassembly. It's a simple preparation of the case. Because the special replacement overdrive piston pin will use a raised O-ring for a positive seal with the bore, we need to add a graceful chamfer here to prevent cutting of the O-ring as the pin is installed. Use a small, fine, half-round or rat tail file and carefully make a gentle radius here. Work slowly and patiently. You will not have to remove much metal. Blow away any filings with compressed air. This concludes the lesson. When you're ready, meet me in Part 2, Lesson 3.